right? So this evening, the topic is unconditional love. And it's so interesting because we've just practiced loving kindness. And my mind now is very joyful, very happy, full of Mettā. And I'm thinking, why don't I do this all the time? In the past few days, I've been a little bit lazy with my Mettā. And the effects are very palpable. Whenever I look at my mind and I see my mind when I don't actively cultivate Mettā, and the effects on my mind when I actively cultivate Mettā. So my mind right now and my mind a half hour ago, radically different minds. But isn't it interesting that then we get forgetful again? And if we don't put right effort, we get back into our sort of laziness that brings us to our all aversions. And yeah, unconditional love, I like the idea, but those people are really difficult to love, aren't they? And I was actually reading the suttas the other day for a change. Ironically, I mean it. And it's so interesting because whenever I read the suttas, it always feels like the first time in certain respects. There's always something new that appears in the mind, something like a sort of layer of depth that I didn't quite get the first time or the second time or the third time. So it's always interesting. It's always refreshing to the mind. And I was going through a lot of difficulties, and I was actually talking to Bante and Bradley actually the other day about this, about this sutta where the Buddha gives recommendations on how to deal with difficult people. And it's interesting because he starts by encouraging us to practice Mettā first, then compassion, then equanimity, then after that to keep distance altogether. So kind of like forget about it. And then to reflect on karma. So to reflect that each one of us is responsible for our own actions, and eventually we will be reaping what we sow. And I was contemplating on these instructions, and because I hadn't practiced Mettā consistently for a while, I was like, wow, I can't even go past number 1. So number 2, I can do it intellectually, or for some people, but not for all the people involved, depending on the circumstances. I can be a little bit equanimous, but it's actually kind of veering a little bit towards indifference. And I'm getting back to obsessing about it. So clearly I can't distance myself from it. And the 5th, is it the 5th? Whatever, the last step, the 5th step, wasn't really kind of doing anything for me. So I was reflecting and then contemplating on this And I realized how the problem was that a lot of the times we use metta as an antidote rather than as a practice um, on a regular basis, which then creates the strength, the momentum for then to be kind of like this reservoir that we can always count on, that we can tap into when we are facing sort of difficult circumstances, difficult people. And it's very difficult. It's kind of like going straight to the most difficult of challenges, which is to wish for someone to be happy when they're doing something not particularly skillful to you. When we skip the first step to even wishing for ourselves to be happy. So wishing for who we have at hand to be happy in every single moment. And whenever we actually really cultivate metta for ourselves, we realize how much happier we become. We realize how much brighter the mind becomes. And we realize how less likely we are to do anything harmful through body, speech, and mind. And that translates easily then into wishing for everyone to be happy. Because if they weren't happy, if they were happy, if they were also cultivating a mind of loving kindness, they wouldn't be indulging in unwholesome behaviors to begin with. So it's a very deep truth in how any sort of unskillful behavior comes from, is fueled by suffering, is not fueled by happiness. And we don't have to look at it externally. We can just look at it in our minds. We can see the quality of the mind. And for example, right now, because I'm still sort of blissed out, don't you love Buddhist practice? You don't have to need to wait for the afterlife to go to paradise. You can just cultivate it right here, right now, and really have dwell in this divine abode. But you cultivate this, and you're like, oh yeah, now there's much more space in my heart. Yeah, of course. I can wish for such and such person to be happy. Yeah, I opened up. And then there's also room to understand, to cultivate that compassion of understanding that we also act unskillfully due to greed, hatred, and delusion, due to suffering. And other people, the quote unquote difficult people, are also acting out of greed, hatred, and delusion. So we realize that the kind of sort of enemy is a common enemy. We're all in the sort of same fight. We all have the same sort of tribulations. So it becomes a little bit more relatable. And we realize that a lot of times, we kind of do it unintentionally. Sometimes it's intentional, but sometimes we really hurt people unintentionally. Our monastery cat Stan is one of the most ungraceful cats in the history of felines. Felines, I don't know how you pronounce it in English.
Feline.
Feline, thank you. Das is also my English teacher. And so sometimes he, jumps on you trying to be like all cuddly and cute, but he loses balance and then he nails you, and his nails get stuck in your skin and it can be really painful. Actually, Bhante Sudasa has really delicate skin, so his skin got severely damaged by Stan a few times. And it's interesting how Stan the cat had no intention to harm me, Bante, or anyone, but out of clumsiness, out of fear, out of delusion, out of greed. A lot of times he has a lot of greed. Sometimes it's hatred towards something, so he gets a little bit restless and does improper things. Then he hurts people around him, hurts his caretakers, hurts people he probably loves. I hope he loves us anyway. So he's very clumsy, right? So I was thinking, there's a bit of a Stan in all of us, isn't there? We can be very, very clumsy, not realizing that we might be harming people here and there. And a lot of times people are doing the same thing. But whether there is the intention or there is not the intention, the root cause is always the same. And when we start seeing things as they are, so we have a clear sort of picture of the situation. So like with Stan, it's very clear to me. Then my mind is very equanimous, accepting of the circumstance. I don't get angry at Stan. I don't start judging Stan, or he should know better than hurting, like clawing my my body, my skin. Start understanding, start seeing, and you're like, oh, it's just like this. This is the situation. And then you can go, okay, perhaps right now I'll keep Stan a little bit at distance, because in one of his moods, sometimes he gets very distressed, very agitated. Bradley has seen it the other day. He was like, okay, Stan is going a little crazy, jumping everywhere, meowing, very melodramatic. So we put Stan in the away for a little while so he could, work on his distress. So you keep him at distance for a little bit. And then you just reflect, each person, each individual, each living being is acting based on different causes and conditions and creating new causes and conditions in every single moment. So probably if we were a cat with sort of skin condition and at the same time a bit of also awareness of the world around him, and kind of both domesticated but at the same time wanting to go out, all different conditions that are happening, we would probably behave in the same exact way. And so then it kind of naturally comes back to where we started. For that wish for every single being, including ourselves, to be happy, to be free from suffering, remembering why we're doing this practice to begin with, which is to eliminate this suffering, to uproot it. And it's a work in progress. But we see how powerful something, even for a short while. How long did we do it? Like 5 minutes, 10 minutes of Mettā we did this evening. Then for such a short amount of time, how much transformation happens in the mind. So, I'm speaking to you, but I'm actually speaking to myself. This is like a sort of self Soma speaking to Soma. And it is very valuable to recollect this and to really be to rejoice in this state of mind, because that then gives us more motivation to nourish it, to sort of water the flowers, water the fruits of Mettā, and make them more bountiful. So I would like to end this by quoting our teacher, the Buddha, from Anguttara Nikaya 11:15. So the Buddha says, when the liberation of the mind by loving kindness has been pursued, developed, and cultivated, made a vehicle and basis, carried out, consolidated, and properly undertaken, 11 benefits are to be expected. What 11? One sleeps well. It's very great, isn't it? The other day with Bhante Siddhava, we were talking about all the different realms of existence of the Deva world. And I admitted, I came out with like my Deva sort of aspiration of once upon a time, which still sometimes comes back to the mind of like, oh, that's a really nice state of existence, and which is the sleeping Deva that sleeps for eons, all like blissed out, relaxed, and kind of, difficulty or things to do, just relaxed. Nice little break. But then you think, actually, I just need to develop Mettā. I don't need to become sleeping Deva. I can just sleep well and have a nice, blameless sleep, regenerating. That then boosts our spiritual practice. And then one awakens happily. Also that, for many of us, doesn't happen much, huh? We're like, oh, snooze, snooze, snooze. You're like, oh, it's already, it's like 5 a.m. already. Feels like 2 a.m. I need 3 more hours of sleep. I don't know if you wake up at 5 a.m. Maybe you wake up at 8 a.m. It doesn't matter. All my life, actually, like most of my life anyway, it didn't matter really what time the alarm clock was set on. It was kind of always not the right time. Actually, there was a period of when I had started working in my 20s, I remember I would wake up so angry, like the opposite of one awakens happily. I would wake up really angry at the world because I had to wake up and do whatever I had to do. So this is another incredible sort of result that we get. We sleep well and we're happy to be awake. Two really great things. One does not have bad dreams. Also makes life much easier. One is pleasing to human beings. So less difficult people to deal with. So we think that the difficult people are the problem, which is why we need to practice so much Mettā. But actually, if we practice Mettā by default, without waiting for the difficult situations and without going like, I really hate them, maybe be happy, but rather you actually cultivate happiness for all beings to begin with. And then there are less and less and less difficult people until there are no difficult people at all. Probably because you're in a Deva realm. Because actually in the human realm, even the Buddha had to deal with difficult people. One is pleasing to spirits. Isn't that interesting? I guess kind of like what I imagine is all the guardian angels that are like, oh, this person's kind of like nice. Let me protect them. all the devas are like, oh, yeah, we have something in common. We have like a good mind of loving kindness. Maybe in Italian we say chi si somiglia si piglia, like who looks alike hangs out together. So like instead of hanging out with other grumps, you're like hanging out with the devas. Isn't that great? Deities protect one because, once again, you're pleasing to them. Interestingly, fire, poison, and weapons do not injure one. Now, may that be both, how do you say it? Is it metaphorical or physical? Well, just cultivate Mettā, develop it, get to it, and then we'll talk about it. One's mind quickly becomes concentrated. Buddha always says that. A happy mind gets easily concentrated. So a lot of times we have all these struggles like in breath, out breath. Oh, but that person, oh. In breath, out breath, in breath, out breath. Oh, but the traffic. Oh, in breath, out breath. So much thoughts of aversion. So clearly, by developing a mind of loving kindness, all of that starts fading away. So you don't even have to work that hard. Because the mind naturally sets in. One's facial complexion is serene. Dalai Lama, very happy person. Venerable Thich Nhat Hanh, very serene complexion. One dies unconfused. Another benefit of cultivating metta. And if one does not penetrate further, one fares onto the Brahma world. So fundamentally, if we don't get fully awakened, we get the second best thing, which is to actually become a deva ourselves. So lots of great stuff, right? So it's interesting. Like whenever I recollect these, I'm like, well, why do I spend so much time actually cultivating the opposite a lot of times? It's almost that instead of like, may I be happy, may I be healthy, may I be safe, may I be unhappy, may I be like really unhealthy, may I be unsafe. So perhaps all of us should recollect that once again, we think a lot of times that practicing metta is of benefit for the outer world, which it is, but first and foremost, it's of benefit to ourselves, to our practice, which then is of benefit to others. But if we don't really start looking at our mind, really start understanding the power that these practices have on our mind, it's very difficult to put them in practice and wish them for others, wish for others to be happy. How can one wish for anyone to do anything if they don't wish them for themselves? So this is what came to mind on the topic.
Well, thank you, Ayya, for sharing words of Dhamma. And at this time, if there's any questions or comments, please enter them in the live chat, and I'll read them out for Ayya to answer. First off, hello, Monica. Happy to see you joining in. And when you mentioned the sleeping devas, Adriana said, wow, I have never heard of those devas. That sounds amazing, LOL.
It's a nice break, isn't it?
AP asks, is there any mention of doing metta meditation practice in the suttas?
is there any mention of doing metta meditation?
In the suttas.
Yeah, it's all over the place of developing metta. Yeah, absolutely. Over and over again. No, it's lovely how the Buddha says pretty much the same thing over and over again in different ways, with, I think, out of incredible compassion, with the hope, like, sooner or later they're gonna get it, you know? It's like, practice metta. Hey, by the way, practice metta. By the way, practice metta. I said practice metta. So then after a while, you're like, maybe I should really practice this metta.
And hello to Elaine and Jessica. And there's no other questions. Oh, wait, here comes another question. AP asks, how often should a person do metta meditation, and how long for each meditation session?
Well, I would recommend to you, myself, and everyone to do it every day. The more, the better. What was the...
And how long each
How
time?
long? Really evaluate the mind. Once again, we did it for a short period of time this evening, but you already see if you actually do it. It doesn't matter how short it is. It's really powerful meditation. Actually, the first retreat that I did, which was at Bhavana Society, was a Mettā retreat, and it was really interesting because I did Mettā meditation for a week, and I came out and I was incredibly blissed out. Actually, to the point that my non-Buddhist friends and my non-spiritual friends, who tend to be aversive, they were actually so annoyed by me because I was I was like such a hippie, like for a period of time. So I was like, oh yes, everything is great, everything is beautiful. And my friends were like, no, everything sucks. Like, let's get real here. But it's interesting because actually, even though I was extremely new to practice, and I was surrounded by people who were really good people, but they weren't particularly, cultivating certain mind states. And then I was also working with a person that I was having some strong difficulties with. By doing that retreat intensively for 7 days, actually the effects on my mind lasted for quite some time, for actually quite a couple of weeks. They obviously went fading away because I wasn't cultivating sort of the practice. I didn't. It was more kind of like you win a lot of money and then you start spending it all. So after a while, the reservoir started ending. But I still clearly remember that up until the person that I was working with, we started arguing, but up until he actually started saying, really kind of insulting me or saying some really heavy stuff, my mind was still holding loving kindness for them. Then he kind of reached a threshold where I sort of went back into my defilements. So I would say it's more, it's kind of like whatever you invest in something, that's what you reap. But better 2 minutes than nothing. But really try to do as much as you can. And also really looking at your mind and being honest with yourself in evaluating what is currently needed, what you need to develop. So today, actually, I recollected that it's very beneficial for me to practice Mett, and I should be doing it every day for multiple times a day. And because it doesn't come naturally easy to me, I have to put a lot of effort into doing it. Then I can become a little bit complacent, a little bit, yeah, I'll do something else. I'll do stuff that I like better. But yeah, once again, one needs to be honest and go, okay, actually, I've gone a little bit too much in that direction. Time to really invest time in cultivating this.
And Adriana asks, when practicing metta, particularly in daily life, should we always use phrases to cultivate the feeling/intention?
I would say do whatever works. I'm not a big fan of one size fits all in Buddhist practice. So actually, that's also what got me into meditation practice. Was actually the sort of approach in the Thai forest tradition, which is more getting familiar with becoming more and more familiar with your mind. Obviously, learning certain techniques the way that whoever teacher that is reputable uh, teaches you. Try them out and then see what works. So like you see, okay, this works, this produces this result. Let me kind of create my own practice based on the instructions. And by my own practice, I mean not like starting to visualize unicorns and ponies and like stars and like flying, with them, which is cute, but not necessarily Buddhist meditation. But rather, yeah, exactly, like doing these evaluations. There are some people who, for them, it works to kind of actually say the words. For some others, to visualize a being. So, for example, at a certain point, I was visualizing we have this really cute fawn in the backyard of the monastery. So his mom, I decided it's male, even though like I have no idea what the gender, but I think I'm influenced by Bambi, the like my Disney dream of like my when I was an infant. Anyway, so we have Bambi in the backyard, and his mom brings him here, and he hides in the grass, in the tall grass, and then we find him like in different corners, and he's so cute, and my mind produces natural loving kindness, and it's also really very interesting because he's also scared by us, but at the same time is understanding that he's safe here. Clearly the mom thinks he's safe here because otherwise she would find a different place for him. So there's that sort of kind of acquaintance. So, but even like I'm like, oh, I just naturally wish for him to be happy, peaceful, and safe, and he just delights my mind instantly with Mettā. So I use that as a visual, but I don't necessarily go make Bambi be happy, peaceful, healthy, and safe. I evoke it, and the feeling comes, and then you're kind of like just watering it. So do whatever works. If that helps you, that's a way. If the mantra helps you, that's another way. Perhaps you don't need either. Especially Adriana, you've got lots of natural loving kindness. So if you have that feeling of loving kindness already arising, just go and nurture it. Fundamentally, that is what is important. It's not really the wording or the visuals, but imbuing our mind with Mettā.
And Gita Ratnayake asks, is there any way breath meditation can be combined with Mettā at the same time?
That's an interesting question. Probably better for Bhante to answer specifically. I will say that what I learned from, I don't like to mix the two. What I like to do, which is kind of sort of what I guided you in, or what I try to share through the guided meditation, what I like to do is whenever I do breath meditation for a short period of time, like we did this evening, my body becomes very relaxed, and my mind very happy. And then I like to incorporate Mettā for myself at the end, because that sort of feeling of peace and happiness in the mind, if I recollect how beneficial it is if I see how much more peaceful my mind is at the end of a meditation than it was at the very beginning. First of all, it kind of encourages me to meditate the next session, like positive association. And then also it makes me experientially value this practice more towards liberation, towards happiness, towards freedom from suffering. Because I realized, well, before there was a bunch of suffering in the mind, now there's less suffering in the mind. So may I be happy, may I be peaceful. The more I do this practice, the more I become happier. And then the consideration, oh, well, if everyone were doing the same, then they would all be happier and peaceful. Why would I wish for anyone not to feel better? You know, even when you think about unhelpful politicians, for example, would you not want for them to do meditation, become more peaceful and kind and loving? It comes without a doubt, right? And so then it becomes easier. So my mind and heart open up, and that becomes like sort of the end of the meditation practice, where I'm like, oh, may everyone be happy, including myself. May we all attain awakening, because it is, in fact, for the benefit of ourselves and others. Everyone benefits. It's a win-win situation.
And Monica says, I try to practice metta every morning. It sets my mind in the right state. The quality of my day benefits. It really makes a huge difference when I don't practice metta. Grazie.
Grazie a te. Yeah, absolutely. Once again, as I shared at the very beginning, I hadn't been practicing metta for a while, and I think actually probably my fellow practitioners were noticing that. Bumke says yes. Yeah, because then your mind naturally starts inclining towards aversion, towards finding fault in things. But if you actually start with the right foot, then everything becomes lighter. Everything becomes as it should be. You actually really start, once again, seeing things as they really are. So realistically, things are really not that bad. And even when we have trouble with difficult people, a lot of times, depending on our reaction towards it, it can feel that the sort of the stress, that the kind of issue has been happening for a lot longer than it actually has been. So say, for example, you've had a fight with a person for 2 or 3 days. Because your mind starts obsessing about it, it feels like 3 months, 3 years, depending. I remember when I used to be in relationships. Once, and I was breaking up with my partner. Felt like a year. I was like, oh dear, I didn't even remember anymore. I remember ending the relationship after several hours of discussion, going, I don't remember anymore why we were supposed to break up, but I remember there was a reason, and I'll just stick with that. But it was exhausting on a physical level. So it's not necessarily what you do that is exhausting, but the mental investment, mental energy that is draining, that you're having. So I feel that by generating metta, then you become naturally understanding, naturally seeing better, naturally giving the right kind of weight to the problems, the issues at hand, and to the relationships with people. And especially you can see that with beings that you have natural metta with. Actually, getting back to the deer, before actually meeting the deer in person, I was kind of like, oh, it's so annoying, the deer that are eating all the plants. Oh, wow, whatever. let's put the like the thing here, wrapping there, and like my mind was veering towards a virgin. Now that I've met the deer, that I've seen him, such a little cutie, and I'm like, oh, actually, we should plant more plants so he can eat more. Mind of loving kindness. So the plants are still damaged, but my mind is full of Mettā. So there is no suffering because the plants are damaged. There's actually happiness that there are sentient beings that are being nourished because of the plants. So it puts everything in the right perspective, I would say, which then, of course, doing it first thing in the morning, you're practicing correctly. That's also when the Buddha says that we're, as monastics, for example, that we are worthy of the support that we get from lay people when we are practicing, even like just a second of Mettā, then that automatically makes it, we're good monks. So it gives you the idea of how powerful the practice is, how good, how beneficial for everyone involved.
And Manny asks, is dedicating our merits Mettā, or is it unconditional love?
Well, Mettā is unconditional love. I mean, it's many things, but I would say it's definitely unconditional love. So dedicating, I mean, it really depends on what you're doing with your mind. So wishing, sharing, there's probably a lot of different things that you're doing. So dana would be one of them, giving. Compassion, you're also generating. It's actually a lot of great things with sharing merits. Lots of wholesome things. And I think, yes, absolutely, there's also Mettā, the wish for everyone to be happy.
Okay. Oh, that's the last question. So if there's nothing else, we'll go ahead and end for the evening. So thank you, Ayya, for sharing Dharma with us this evening. Mm-hmm. And thank you to all of you for joining in and participating. And hopefully we'll see you again tomorrow. So we'll end with 3 sadhus. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.